People come to the Minnesota State Fair for cheese curds, pronto pups, and family fun. And each year, the Minnesota House of Representatives booth conducts a poll that gives fairgoers a chance to offer their opinion on topics the legislature has previously considered or may take up in the future.
Well, it included a couple questions that I was concerned about.
I thought the poll was good and relevant.
Let's take a look at the results of this year's poll. A continual topic of disagreement in the legislature is new funding for mass transit in the Twin Cities metro area. Proponents of expanding a metro area transit dedicated sales tax say the proceeds will help develop the area's system of light rail, rapid bus transit, and bus routes. Others oppose the idea, saying lawmakers should focus on the state's road and bridge infrastructure before funding additional transit projects. With an increase in gun violence in Minnesota and throughout the country, poll takers overwhelmingly believe that criminal background checks should be required on all gun sales, including private transactions and at gun shows. Proponents of universal background checks on proposed gun purchases say that without background checks, people known to be dangerous can easily get guns. While opponents argue that background checks don't stop criminals from acquiring firearms by stealing or getting them from the black market or straw purchasers. Fairgoers were also asked if schools and businesses should be able to require individuals to use restroom and locker room facilities based on biological sex as defined at birth. The question is based on a bill sponsored by Representative Glenn Gruenhagen, a Republican from Glencoe. It would amend the state's Human Rights Act to provide definitions governing public restrooms based on biological sex assigned at birth. Gruenhagen says the bill would protect the privacy and public safety of adults both in our society and schools. However, opponents say the bill would further promote sexual discrimination and contribute to harassment and violence. School districts are currently subject to the Minnesota Government Data Practices Act and the Federal Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act. Still, some Minnesotans are worried about the type of information being collected about students. We asked whether government agencies and institutions should be required to obtain parental consent before disclosing personally identifiable data on students to a third party other than law enforcement. Opponents argue, in part, that without the information, it could negatively impact the Minnesota statewide longitudinal education data system's ability to evaluate educational outcomes and the effectiveness of financial aid programs. Poll takers were also asked if they would support an increase to the state's 28.5 cents per gallon gas tax by at least 10 cents to help fund highway and bridge needs across the state.
I just think they got to do something about the roads, and however you do that, it's going to cost, so you got to pay for it.
Proponents believe a gas tax increase will generate funds needed to maintain Minnesota's roads and bridges. However, those opposed to the idea say there are alternative ways to generate the funds, including redirecting current sales tax proceeds from other things such as those on auto parts. Staying with the driving theme, we asked if everyone convicted of a DWI should be required to use a breathalyzer device for a prescribed period of time before they can retain full driving privileges. Supporters say offenders who opt to install an ignition interlock device are far less likely to be arrested for a repeat drunk driving offense, and the change would help combat drunk driving. Opponents counter that implementing a breathalyzer device for all offenders is impractical because some don't own cars or can't afford the devices. A 2015 white paper from the Department of Health found that workers who received paid sick and family leave are healthier, and so are their families and the public they serve. The question posed to poll takers, should it be mandatory that employees in workplaces with 6 or more workers accumulate 1 hour of sick leave for every 30 hours worked, with a maximum of 40 hours of accrual each year? Opponents say this proposal would cost businesses more money, which could possibly lead to layoffs, downsizing, or even cause the businesses to close. One of the poll questions that fairgoers reacted to was, when a mentally capable adult is dying from a terminal illness, do you think this adult should be allowed to receive a prescription for life-ending medication they may self-administer?
There can be a humane way to assist people with end of life, provided there are some regulations and screening so that people aren't misusing that, but that there is dignity in how people end their life with respect and at the appropriate time. And cuts the medical costs down significantly too.
This question was based off House File 2095, sponsored by Representative Mike Freiberg, a DFLer from Golden Valley. It would have established the so-called Compassionate Care Act for terminally ill patients. Opponents argue that change could potentially lead to abuse of disabled and elderly people and an increase in suicide rate. Circling back to another question about driving, poll takers were asked if it should be illegal to talk on a wireless communication device while driving. Proponents have noted that distracted driving is one of the leading causes of traffic incidents, especially among young drivers. However, opponents have countered they should have freedom of choice while behind the wheel. According to the Project on Student Debt, the average Minnesota college student has more than $30,000 in debt when they graduate. Poll takers were asked, should the state provide an individual income tax credit of up to $5,000 for principal and interest payments on student loans?
Yeah, going into college this year, and I like to think about a potential tax credit for loans. But
supporters say a tax credit would help stimulate the economy and encourage students to stay in or move to Minnesota. Some against the idea say that the tax credit, which would be the highest in the nation, would be too costly. The last two questions we asked relate to voting. From 1913 until 1973, Minnesota legislators were elected on nonpartisan ballots, meaning there was no political party designation for individual members. The question asked to poll takers, should legislators be elected without political party designation? This question was based off of House File 1282, a bill sponsored by Representative Jim Knobloch, a Republican from St. Cloud. Knobloch believes the change would foster more cooperation in the legislature and allow lawmakers to put progress before politics. Finally, we asked if a citizens-only council should be created to set salaries for legislators. This question will be on the November 2016 ballot as a proposed constitutional amendment. Those in support of this idea say legislator pay is a financial hardship for some people willing to serve in what is called a part-time role, while opponents say the proposal could be seen as a way of getting a pay raise for legislators. Thanks to those who participated in our annual State Fair Opinion Poll. We look forward to doing it again in 2017.